everybody, and welcome to the Music Minds podcast. My name is Tony Fennell, and joining me from Brooklyn, New York is John Stone. How are you, mate?
Hanging in there, Tony. How are you doing up there in Boston town?
I'm really good. Today's show is called How to Make Money with Music Today. Each and every week, John and I try to get down to the nitty-gritty of the minefield we call the music business. We concentrate on helping you protect your music, your copyright, and image rights. And if you've been listening to our show regularly, we'd like to think that we've given you some pretty darn good insight and advice over the last couple of months. What we've decided to address this week is how to make money. Yes, you heard me right. How to make money out of your music and talent. Now, there's a first.
There you go.
All right, so before we get into the good stuff, you know, how to turn a profit and make your hard work count,
right.
Let's address some of the bad. All right, so you've got your album written and recorded, it's back from mastering, and you've uploaded it to your distributor of choice, you know, Apple's new version of iTunes, whatever that's called, CD Baby, TuneCore, Bandcamp, you know them. And, you know, what you're hoping now is that your chosen outlet is going to do all the heavy lifting for you. Wrong! It's estimated, and this is crazy, John, it's estimated that there are over 30 million songs available for purchase, download, or stream.
Wow.
That is 30 million.
Yikes.
Knowing that, you need a strategy. The upload and pray method never works, yet tons and tons of indie musicians do exactly that. We've said it before and we'll say it again, social media can be a huge help, and some genres of music have large and thriving online communities that you can seek out and become part of. I mean, you've got to do that, right? Remember, as we pointed out, the music that you create and the brand you establish are very, very valuable assets. And that's why we saw a handful of large independent labels get bought out by some of the big boys over the last 5 years or so.
Yep.
What's your take on this, John? Is that a pretty fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you've just as you've said, you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating this product, shall we call it, and now you've got it up on these platforms and in different ways of trying to get it out there to the public. And now you got to figure out, well, how am I going to garner and build that audience and get people to not just become the casual fan, but turn them into actual supporters and real fans that are going to buy your product and come see you perform and buy your merch and all that other magical stuff that turns you into a rock star or whatever kind of genre of music you're in. You know, so.
Totally. Listen, if you're making hats at home and you've got, 30, 40 fantastic hats and no one sees them, they're just 30 or 40 fantastic hats taking up a ton of room.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we do this? How can we make money out of the art that we make?
Well, it's very funny because in the old days when we were young men, Tony, it was a far simpler time when you basically put it together and you got it to A&R people, or you got it maybe to a publisher, or you got it to a DJ on the radio in some way or another, and they played it, and all of a sudden you became an overnight star, and people signed you, and you got your big advance, and you bought your mansion, and you went touring the world, and you became, that happened to about 1% of anybody even in the old days. So,
and that was the 1920s you're talking about, right?
The 1920s when mechanicals actually meant a player piano. But,
hey, there you go.
So now you're looking at what the internet has done, has made leveled the playing field to a certain extent, but that means that there is a much more competition, and there are a lot more people out there competing for the same ear as you are. So what makes you different? What makes you unique? And how do you go from getting your music up onto a platform to actually making it, a viral sensation of some sort? And we've talked about, Tony, everything that goes on with the people that are putting content onto YouTube and other platforms, and all of a sudden they blow up and they're making millions of dollars. The people who are creating something with music and other pieces of content and art and stuff, they should be given that same opportunity, but it just doesn't seem to translate as easily as, some jerk sitting there playing a video game and getting millions of views. So,
well, that's the truth of the matter. And the other thing is, John, as we both know, and the audience should know by now, it is bombarded
Yeah.
The amount of videos and the amount of audio, how on earth do you get through the mire? I mean, it's really difficult, really difficult.
And it's interesting because, to a certain extent, and as we talked about with one of the previous episodes, with something like TikTok, where, it's not just that you put your video up there and you sit there and count views and try and get your friends and family and whatever supporters you have to sort of look at your video or look at your audio that's, being put into a video format on that platform and getting it out that way. Something like TikTok has actually got the algorithms already there. So if you put something up and somebody, halfway around the world hears it and puts it on their video and they already have people following them, all of a sudden it can blow up and be, in front of or being viewed by and listened to by millions of people potentially. But then how do you turn those people into actual fans and supporters of you? If you're somebody as we talked about with that episode, there's some band in Atlanta, and somebody else put their thing on their TikTok video, and all of a sudden that band blew up, and they're getting millions of streams.
But that's purely by chance, though, John. I mean, that is, and you can't. And this is what I was trying to say at the very beginning of this podcast. You can't leave it to chance. You can't just say, "All right, we've uploaded it, and now someone's going to do the quote unquote heavy lifting." They're not.
Right.
It's got to be you.
Right. So as we talked about in the last episode, Tony, where you're getting that, how do you turn that contact in the music industry into a connection? Somebody that actually can pick your music up and take and run with it and help you build a career around that. That's that point of, getting your stuff out there to getting somebody of note to follow you and pick it up and work with you on it. That's that, magic trick, so to speak. So I really think, yes, you've got to get your stuff out there. In my mind, just looking at what I've seen recently and the way things sort of move in the viral sphere, so to speak, online and stuff. Making a video, it can be simple, but I think a video at least gets you in the same playing field, so to speak, as everybody else that's out there. There are all these different platforms that you could put it on, and you really have to motivate your base. You have to, and something that I talked about, base meaning your fans and the people that you already know, and something that I had talked about. I'd worked on a project a few years ago where we were trying to do a music reality show. Basically, I was helping somebody put the project together, and their goal was, well, what do you do to build your audience, and how do you get it? And I'm sure millions or a lot of people in this business do this and use this theory, but I had the 10, 20, 30, 40 approach. And if you look at your base of fans and followers and supporters as a whole, you have 100%. So 40% of that are going to be casual listeners, people who maybe hear your stuff, maybe follow you and listen to whatever music you put out and kind of like you, maybe will show up once in a while to a show, but they're casually involved. They're not really following you and supporting you and that sort of thing. Then you have 30% engaged supporters. Those are people who are much more into it. They're buying, they're coming to see your shows, they're following you on giving you likes and giving you clicks and all that sort of thing. 20% dedicated, which are people who are really following you and actively looking for content from you and music. And then your 10% hardcore fans, which are the ones that are always at the shows and buying your merch and doing all of that stuff you need in order to, say this is an actual fan who's going to be there for me down the road. So moving people from casual to engaged to dedicated to hardcore, you got to be active and creative in getting their attention, first of all, and then bringing them in to becoming active supporters, because there's so many streams of information and material and stuff being thrown at them every day, that breakthrough point. So that, to me, again, it's like a video of something that's going to get you, when you're talking about like a crowdfunding campaign, they say one of the most effective things you can do is a face-to-camera appeal. And so you put that up, and if people have signed up for your crowdfunding campaign and such, you sitting there talking about, this is what we're doing now, and this is our newest thing. You should be looking at your career as a crowdfunding campaign to be certain. Oh, I mean,
there's no better way. I mean, you nailed it with the true fans thing. I mean, the simple math tells us, if you get $100 from 1,000 fans, you're looking at $100,000.
Yeah.
That's $100,000, you know, and that's
Yes.
where true fans are worth their weight in gold. I mean,
Yeah.
we've seen it, and it's been coming out more and more lately, all of these fake fan accounts.
Yes, and you know, how do you again make those? How are you going to get somebody to spend $100? I mean, you go and say,
Get them
hey,
to put their hand in their pocket. That's the toughest. You're right.
Exactly. That's the truest fan you're going to get, is somebody who's actually willing to shell out the whole cold hard cash to actually be a part of your, you know, your musical experience, so to speak. Now, when we were talking about before with social media, there are ways when you know, if you should put something up onto YouTube or somewhat or any of these other platforms, there are ways you can do some ad buys that are economical, you know, and you can geo-target, as we call it in the business, or I call it at least, where you know, you're in Boston, okay, and you want to be able to build an audience in Boston so you can get regular gigs, you know, monthly gigs at some of the bigger clubs and show anybody, a concert promoter, as we've talked about recently, Tony, that say,
Yes.
hey, we have a fan base, we're building that here. So you can do some targeting of advertising on other people's social media platforms to get them to go, oh, wow, what's this all about? And using those magical algorithms to say, if you like this, you'll like this, you know,
Yeah.
so that sort of thing. So that's a way to build it and start bringing people in. But to go piece by piece, you know, we'll do a show and then hopefully that crowd will, you know, get bigger next time. As you've said, Tony, you can't just have wishful thinking here or magical thinking.
No.
It's a real hard process, and in many ways, I think it's actually harder than just making the music. I mean,
I
the music
agree. And
part's
look,
easy.
You're right. You're 1,000% right. And you need them at the gigs because, again, we're trying to work a way out here how bands can self-sustain. You know, they can make some cash. And, you know, if you get them to the gigs, CDs and vinyl can be a major source of income depending on your distribution channel. I mean, let's keep in mind that selling CDs and vinyls at vinyl albums at shows, they account for 25% of your income each night, minimum. You know, and you'll get more money selling CDs and vinyl than selling T-shirts or clothing at the gigs. These are all revenue streams for bands, and you're selling your product.
Yeah.
You know, we got to get them there. The gigs, you know, even the gigs themselves, John, you know, ticket sales, obviously they're big revenue for any band. But, you know, the PROs, the performing rights organizations like ASCAP and BMI, they've got systems in place where you can collect a royalty check on each live performance. How does that work, John? Because that's a way of... Again, that's another source of income.
Sure. That's why it's so important. Now, I say this ad nauseum. You got to get all your rights secured and get everything laid down. But once you let's go through the process, Tony. Let's mythically, you know, let's say that you and I have put a band together. Okay. And we have just recorded, you know, we don't even have to do a full album anymore. You do an EP. All right, 6 songs. Each of them has its own potential to be a single, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so now we've put it up onto our SoundCloud. We've maybe done a little live performance video or something like that we've put on YouTube. We've got our social media platforms up. We're trying to garner people to be interested in us. Maybe we put out a little ad campaign sort of thing, which you could do for like under $100. And we're starting to get a little buzz. We've done some good shows. People have started to pay attention to us, whatnot. Okay, so what do we have to do? Well, we've got our recording of those 6 songs. We've got our publishing on those 6 songs. So we have to make sure we've got everything copyrighted, okay, which does cost a little bit of money, but it's a worthwhile investment. On the master recording and the publishing for that, we make sure you and I have just written everything together, Tony, okay? We do words and music 50-50, all done, okay?
So, whoa, hang on a minute. I'm joking.
I mean, 70 me and 30 you. So then we now want to get that music registered with a performing rights society I'm talking about here in the United States. So we're going to sign up with either BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, something like that. Because what that is, and what you were just talking about, Tony, is when a song is performed publicly, if it's on the radio, if it's in a club, if it's on, you get some lucky break and you get it onto TV, something like that, public performance, has revenue that you can get from it. So you want to make sure you're properly registered. And anytime you're performing out live, if you're in a club and you make sure that they have their performing rights licenses, you can then go and say, hey, we performed here. We have our music on this radio station or website or whatnot. And you can go and make sure that ASCAP and your PRO is aware of that. And then you can get a little, look, you're not going to retire on this money, but it is money coming in.
I was going to say, how much money do you think you get for that?
Well, it really depends. So, they use a very complicated formula. Even us in the industry
of course
kind
they do.
throw our hands up in the air and wonder. And we've talked about this, the mutual the friend of yours, Tony, who I had talked to a while, who was very dissatisfied with the performance income he was getting because he was seeing that their music was playing at clubs and yet all the money kept going to Taylor Swift. So he's like, wait a minute, why am I not getting paid? I know my music gets played out there. What's the deal? But they use a very complicated system. It's a lot of guesswork. It's based on what they perceive as the saturation of your music in the market, and it's a lot of different formulas. Just as one example, so if your music gets put into a TV show and that TV show gets on network television, you're going to get a good chunk of change off that first performance because it's the biggest exposure it's going to get. If that show is going into reruns or getting into syndication and stuff, you'll still continue to get money, but it'll be less and less as you go along. When that show plays during the day is going to matter. The audience of that show is going to matter. So, an ASCAP will use all these different numbers and parameters to say, all right, well, it has a big audience. You have a big audience. The show is on at prime time and whatnot. So we can sort of pull a number out from that, and that'll get you a little bit more money. But if you're playing the overnight on an infomercial or something like that, you're going to get a lot less money. It's the same thing with a club. If you're playing the Palladium, all right, or if you're playing one of the big clubs here in the city, and you're doing a 3 nights or something like that, you're doing a residency there, that's going to get you some more money. And what that club does is it pays an annual fee to these PROs, and then that gets split up based upon the music that's playing at that club. So again, you're not going to retire on this, but it is important to know that this is another way that you can make some money, and you get a small check and go from there. But the bigger you get, the more you do, the better off, the more exposure you have, the more money you'll be able to make from it. Same thing on the internet and all the other places too.
Absolutely. I mean, I got a question for you, and it's this could be a whole show in itself. But again, your band's getting bigger. We're out there, we're playing. Our band, John, by the way, that I've got 70%, you got 30%. I'm just making sure we've got that down. So we're out there and we're playing and we're getting bigger. We've got some great songs. People are going, listen, their catalog is pretty darn good. Maybe another way, instead of doing a full-on publishing deal, we can do an admin deal. So we're retaining our stuff, but we're getting a bit of cash to sustain ourselves. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And there are companies out there that are always looking for somebody new. Look, you'd be really surprised at how you'll see bands and artists, especially the way that, again, going back to how the market is sort of fractured right now, or has been split up in a much different way than it used to be. It was much more hierarchical. Now it's really just catch as catch can. Some music supervisor, and again, as we've talked about this with television and film, etc., a TV supervisor, music supervisor can find you and suddenly say, hey, I love your stuff. I want to get you onto this TV show. It's a hit show. Now, we'll talk about this in a moment, the different types of fees that you can get for different types of exploitations, including synchronization. We'll be able to give you one sync fee. It's a flat fee that you get paid up front. And then, again, that helps to get performance income down the road because that TV show is going to be registered, on that network, and that network is registered with the PROs, and you can get some performance income from that as it goes along. But you get it in there. But a lot of times these bands don't have any representation, these artists. So
I know.
They're doing it themselves, or maybe if they have a lawyer or they have a manager or somebody, that person's doing it for them. And sometimes they can leave money on the table because they don't exactly know the rights. They don't exactly know all the different ways that the song can be used. And you want to be able to make sure that they, that any way that you can make money from that, especially if they're doing different types of exploitations of it, if it's being used to advertise the show or something like that, that always can bring you a little bit more money. So where you want to go is you don't have a publishing company, but you do have exposure and people are paying attention to you. So you can then go to a publisher and say, hey, we're not just some schmucks playing in the sticks here. We actually have something on TV. We have music out there. We have a fan base. We have streams. We have ways to make money. And a publisher will go, okay, here are some ways that we can work with you. And they can do an admin deal. They can do a straight deal, a straight publishing deal. So an admin deal means you retain all your rights. They're basically representing your catalog for different types of licensing and collecting revenue for you. They take their little percentage off the top, usually about 15, 20%. Depends, and you get the rest of it, and you hold on to your publishing and stuff. A straight publishing deal is you assign your rights to the publisher, and the publisher will then control the rights to the song. You still have your right to refuse if you don't like somebody using your song in a show or whatnot, but you're giving your rights over to them. That usually comes with some sort of an advance payment that will be given to you, and again, it depends on how hot you are and such. And there are different ways. There's pitch and place, which is basically they just represent you for synchronization, and you take care of everything else yourself, and again, that is for a percentage of whatever money they bring in. Sometimes they can trigger if they get you placed on a really great show or film or a commercial or something, and there's a revenue level reached from that, that can automatically turn it into a full-on publishing deal or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. And on the label side, I don't want to downplay labels because I'm on the publishing side, but labels don't do the same thing that they used to do. I mean, they do manage the rights to your master recording, and they can do some distribution for you and keep track of all that. But really, as much as anything, they're much more about promotion right now. I mean, you know this as much as anybody, Tony, because you've been, had a lot of recording deals and stuff. It's not so much, they're not warehousing and pressing vinyl and warehousing and distributing in the old
not
ways.
Anymore.
They're basically just tracking streams and such and collecting whatever they can from that. So it's a different model on that side. But publishing, as I will always say, is where the rubber meets the road in this business. So everything that you can lock down on that side is only going to be beneficial to you.
Absolutely. And I'll touch on one last thing before we wrap it up. Musicians, we work really, really hard. And some people don't and they get lucky. But, most of us, we sit there and we rehearse and we practice and we're writing songs and we're trying really hard. And it's any way we can make a buck, really, a lot of the times. But there are government-sponsored programs, right? I mean, what about the National Endowment for the Arts? I mean, is that few and far between? Is it something that some of our listening audience could actually look into? I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, you can go to the NEA, the National Endowment of the Arts. I mean, a lot of these are based in many ways, the cultural center in a city or in a state or something like that. They'll have these types of things. Again, in this instance, it's almost that they would be giving you money to create something specific toward a social issue or something that enhances the culture. So it may not just be, hey, we have music, give us money and use our song. It's a little bit more involved than that, and it's definitely something that you can look into, but you have to be prepared at that point to say, you have to put a proposal together and you have to say, this is what we're going to do with this. And there's always ways to do that. But, you have to be prepared then to do the work that's going to be associated with getting that grant and you're really putting it out to the public in that specific way. It helps enhance your brand. Absolutely. It helps bring you out, but it's a whole new project as opposed to just taking your music that exists already and trying to get it out in different channels.
Well, and that makes sense. I just happened to think about it as we were talking. I was thinking there's got to be some kind of grants because in England they like to hand those out. They actually, it's interesting. With regards to sport, there's no help whatsoever. With regards to music and the arts now, England has actually caught up with the rest of the world and are going, okay, we can help. If you're really dedicated, we can help. Look, John, we could go on and on and on and on, but look, I want to thank you, as always, mate, for again, brilliant advice. I want to thank our listening audience. And listen, don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast, and you can catch all of the episodes on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, InTune Radio, and Stitcher. And by the way, check out our YouTube channel, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. And for those of you who want a little bit more info, check out our website, www.musicmindspodcast.com. John Stone, you're a star, and I will see you next week. That's for sure, mate.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
And for everybody else, next time, see ya!